All Mother, sentient beings limitless as space, especially those enemies who hate us, obstructors who harm us, and those who create obstacles on the path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be free of suffering, and swiftly may they realize precious, unsurpassed, perfectly complete enlightenment. May all Mother sentient beings limitless as space have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they not be separate from the sacred happiness that is free of sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free of attachment and aversion. Introduction to the Sutra of Hui-neng, Grand Master of Zen, with Hui-neng's commentary on the Diamond Sutra, translated from Chinese by Thomas Cleary. Hui-neng, 638-713, is a central figure of Zen Buddhist tradition, the last of the early Grand Masters or founding teachers of Zen. Hui-neng is popularly considered the founder of the so-called Southern School of Zen. Hui-neng characterized their teaching as the teaching of immediacy, based on direct insight into the essential nature of awareness. As a testimony of his eminent place in Zen tradition, the record of Hui-neng's life and lectures is the only such document to be dignified with the title of sutra or scripture. The word traditionally reserved in Buddhist literature for the teachings of a Buddha. Hui-neng lived during the Tang Dynasty 619-906, which is often considered the apogee of Chinese culture. The development of Chinese Buddhism was particularly marked during this era, assisted by imperial patronage. Translators from India, Khotan, Sodhyana, Tocharya, Kucha, and other lands continued the enormous work of rendering the Buddhist canons into Chinese, while great masters of emerging Chinese schools pursued the full articulation of pragmatic synthesis of the teachings. Hui-neng is traditionally said to have been an illiterate woodcutter from a frontier area. He attained enlightenment as a young man of no account, the story goes, and inherited the rank of Grand Master of Zen. Subsequently, he was obliged to flee the persecution of jealous elitists, and he disappeared into the mountains. Hui-neng re-emerged in middle age as the last of the Zen founders, finally popularizing the teaching among all classes of people. Although he himself was unlettered and expounded Buddhism in the simplest of terms, Hui-neng's students and disciples included Confucian scholars as well as eminent monks, even a Buddhist canon master from India. The career of Hui-neng had an incalculable effect on the dissemination of Zen in China. According to the biography of Hui-neng recorded in traditional Zen sources, there were 33 people known as formal successors of the Grand Master who taught Zen openly. There were an unrecorded number of others who attained the teachings. The biography adds who concealed their names and hid their tracks. The names of 10 of these hidden masters have been found, although nothing else is known about them. Besides these 43 known successors of Hui-neng, Grand Master of Zen, it is also said that countless people awakened to the way and transcended the ordinary under the impact of his teaching. 2 versions of Hui-neng's sutra called the Altar Sutra are readily available today. A manuscript of an older, briefer version attributed to Hui-neng's disciple Fa Hai was discovered among the many works unearthed at Tunhuang. A more detailed version compiled in 1291 was based on a number of texts. It is on this fuller version that the present translation is based. The compiler of this version of the sutra, a monk named Tsongpao, notes in an afterword to his edition. The teachings that the 6th Grand Master used to expound were all the complete, all-at-once message of the great vehicle. That is why this is called a sutra. The words are everyday, but its guidance is far-reaching, the expression is easy, the meaning is clear. Everyone who reads it gets something from it. Master Ming Qiao praised it by saying, "Those whose natural potential is sharp will get the deep." Those whose natural potential is dull will get the shallow. How true these words are. When I first entered the way, I was inspired by this sutra. Subsequently, I saw 3 different texts of varying quality. The wood blocks were already worn out, so I made a comparison of the texts, correcting errors and filling in abbreviations, also adding the stories of disciples' questions in hopes that those who wish to learn may get the message. Chapter 1: Personal History, Realization of the Teaching, and Inheritance of the Robe. When the great master came to the forest of Jewel's monastery, Governor Wei of Shao province went into the mountains with some government officers to request the master to come out into the city and preach for the people at the lecture hall of the great Brahma monastery. When the master took the chair, the governor, over 30 officials, over 30 Confucian scholars, and more than 1,000 monks, nuns, and lay people all bowed at once and asked to hear the essentials of the teaching. The Grand Master said to the crowd, "Good friends, Bodhi is inherently pure. Just use this mind and you will directly realize Buddhahood. Good friends, for now listen to the course of events through which I realized the teaching. My father was originally from Fanyang, but he was banished to Lingnan, where he became a peasant in Xinnu province. Unfortunately for me, my father also died early. With my widowed mother, I moved to Nanhai, where we suffered from poverty as I sold firewood for a living. One day a customer purchased some kindling and had me deliver it to his shop. The customer received the wood and I left the shop with my money. Outside, I saw a traveler reciting a scripture. On hearing the words of the scripture, my mind opened up and I understood. I asked the traveler what scripture he was reciting. He said it was the Diamond Sutra. I then asked him where he had gotten this scripture from. He said, "I got it from the Eastern Meditation Monastery in Huangmei Prefecture in Qi Province, where Great Master Hong Zhen, the 5th Grand Master of Ch'an Buddhism, is teaching over 1,000 students." I went there and listened to the scripture that the Great Master always recommends to both clergy and lay folk, saying that if they keep the Diamond Sutra, they will see their own essential nature and directly realize Buddhahood. Hearing this explanation, I felt a pre-existing affinity. I was given 10 ounces of silver by a customer to enable me to provide food and clothing for my mother, letting me go right to Huangmei to call on the 5th Grand Master. After having gotten my mother settled, I left right away and reached Huangmei within 30-odd days. There I paid respects to the 5th Grand Master. The Grand Master asked, "Where are you from and what do you want?" I replied, "I'm a peasant from Xin Province in Lingnan. I have come from far away to pay my respects to you, only because I seek to be a Buddha, nothing else." The Grand Master said, "You are a southerner and an aborigine. How can you be a Buddha?" I said, "People may be southerners or northerners, but the Buddha nature originally has no south or north. As an aborigine, my social status is not the same as yours, but what difference is there in our Buddha nature?" The Grand Master wanted to talk with me more, but he saw that his followers were all around. So he had me do chores with the workers. I said to him, "My own mind always produces wisdom. Not being alienated from one's own essential nature is itself a field of blessings. What work would you have me do?" The Grand Master said, "This aborigine is very sharp. Don't say any more. Go work in the mill." So I retired to a back building where a worker had me splitting firewood and pounding rice. I spent over 8 months at this, when the Grand Master saw me one day and said, "I think your insight is reliable, but I was afraid bad people would harm you, so I didn't talk to you. Do you realize this?" I said, "I do know your intention. That is why I didn't dare walk in front of the auditorium lest one be careless." One day the Grand Master called all his disciples to him and said, "I tell you, for people in this world, the matter of birth and death is serious. You lot just seek fields of blessings all day long and do not seek to get out of the ocean of misery of birth and death. If your own nature is confused, how can blessings save you? Let each of you look into your own wisdom, grasp the insightful nature of your own basic mind, and compose a verse to show me. If you have understood the great meaning, I will bequeath to you the robe and the teaching, and make you the sixth Grand Master. It is urgent, so do not tarry. Thinking about it is no use. People who have seen essential nature should see it the moment it's mentioned. Someone like this could see it even in a battle line of whirling swords. If your own nature is confused, how can blessing save you? Let each of you look into your own wisdom, grasp the insightful nature of your own basic mind, and compose a verse to show me. If you have understood the great meaning, I will bequeath to you the robe and the teaching, and make you the sixth Grand Master. It is urgent, so do not tarry. Thinking about it is no use. People who have seen essential nature should see it the moment it's mentioned. Someone like this could see it even in a battle line of whirling swords." After the followers had received these directions, they withdrew and said to each other, "The bunch of us don't have to clear our minds and concentrate on composing verses to show the teacher. What would be the use? Shen Shu, the senior, is presently the mentor. He will surely get it. If the likes of us presumed to compose verses, we'd be wasting mental energy." Other people hearing this all set their minds to rest, saying, "We will rely on Master Shen Shu after this. Why bother to compose a verse?" Shen Shu reflected, "The reason the others won't present verses is that I am their mentor. I must compose a verse to present to the teacher. If I do not present a verse, how will the teacher know the depth or the shallowness of the insight and understanding within my mind? If my intention in presenting a verse is to seek the teaching, then it is good. If it is to seek the rank of Grand Master, that is bad. It would be the same as the ordinary mentality. How would it be different from usurping the rank of a sage? If I do not present a verse, I'll never get the teaching. This is very difficult, very difficult." In front of the fifth Grand Master's auditorium was a hallway 3 rooms long where they were going to have an artist paint a mural of the projection of the Altar Sutra and the succession of the 5 Grand Masters of Ch'an. After Shen Shu had composed his verse several times, he got as far as the front of the auditorium, intending to present it, but each time he felt faint and broke out in a sweat. Unable to bring himself to present his verse, over a period of 4 days he made 13 unsuccessful attempts. Finally, Shen Shu thought, "It would be better if I wrote the verse in the hallway, where the teacher can see it. If the teacher says it is good, I will respectfully come forth and declare it to be my composition. If he says it won't do, I have been wasting years in the mountains, accepting respect from others. What further path would I practice?" That night, in the middle of the night, letting no one know, he took a lamp and wrote his verse on the wall of the south hallway, presenting his insight. The verse said, "The body is the tree of enlightenment. The mind is like a clear mirror stand. Polish it diligently time and again, not letting it gather dust." Having written this, Shen Shu went back to his room totally undetected by anyone. Shen Shu also thought, "If the Grand Master is pleased when he sees my verse tomorrow, then I have affinity with the teaching. If he says it is unworthy, it is my own illusion. The barriers of my existing habits are manifold, and I am not fit to get the teaching. The mind of a sage is hard to fathom." As he thought in his room, he was uneasy whether he sat up or lay down. This continued until dawn. Now the Grand Master already knew that Shen Shu had not yet entered the gate and did not see his own essential nature. In the morning he called the artist Lu Kong Feng to make the mural on the wall of the south hallway. Suddenly seeing the verse, the Grand Master told the artist not to proceed with the mural. Thanking him for his trouble, Scripture says that all forms are illusory. He said, Just leave this verse for people to recite. If they act in accord with this verse, they will avoid falling into evil ways. There is great benefit in acting accord to this verse. He instructed the disciples to light incense, pay respect to the verse, and learn the verse so they could see essential nature. The disciples recited the verse and all celebrated it admiringly. In the middle of the night, the Grand Master asked Shen Shu to his quarters and said, "Was it you who composed this verse?" Shen Shu said, "I did compose the verse, but I do not presume to seek the rank of Grand Master. I hope for your compassion to see whether I have any wisdom or not." The Grand Master said, "Your composition of this verse indicates you have not yet seen your fundamental nature. You have only arrived outside the gate. You have not yet entered inside. If you seek unsurpassed enlightenment with an understanding like this, you will never be able to attain it. Unsurpassed enlightenment requires that you be able to recognize your own basic mind at a word, and see your own original nature unborn and undying. When you see yourself at all times, moment to moment, with no lingering over anything at all, as one is real, all are real. Myriad objects are themselves suchness, as is. Consciousness of suchness, as is real truth. If you see in this way, this is the inherent nature of unsurpassed enlightenment. Go away for now and reflect for a day or two. Then compose another verse. If I see by your verse that you have succeeded in entering the gate, I will entrust the robe and the teaching to you." Shen Shu bowed and left. When several more days had passed and he still had not managed to produce a verse, he felt faint at heart and uneasy in spirit, and thought he was as if in a dream. He was uneasy and uncomfortable, whether he was walking around or sitting down. 2 days later, a boy passing by the mill was chanting that verse. As soon as I heard it, I realized this verse did not yet reveal the fundamental essence. Although I had not received instruction, I already knew the main idea, so I asked the boy, "What verse is that you're chanting?" The boy said, "You aborigine, don't you know that the Grand Master said for people in this world, the matter of birth and death is serious? If they want to get transmission of the robe and the teaching, he had the disciples compose verses. If anyone had realized the great meaning, he will transmit the robe and the teaching and make him the sixth Grand Master." The senior monk Shen Shu wrote this formless verse on the wall of the south hallway. The Grand Master had everyone memorize it, saying that if one puts this verse into practice, one will avoid falling into evil ways. And if one puts this verse into practice, one will gain great benefit. I said, "I have been here pounding rice for over 8 months, and have never been to the auditorium. Please take me to where the verse is, so I can pay my respects." When the boy had led me to the verse to pay respects, I said, "I am illiterate. Please read for me." At that time, the Lieutenant Military Inspector of Ch'an Province was there, a man named Chang Chi-hyong. He read the verse aloud. After I had heard it, I said I had a verse too, and asked the Lieutenant Inspector to write it for me. The Lieutenant Inspector said, "How extraordinary that you too would compose a verse." I said to the Lieutenant Inspector, "If you want to learn supreme enlightenment, don't slight beginners. A person of the lowliest rank may have the very highest knowledge, while a person of the highest rank may lack even practical wisdom. If you slight people, you will have done incalculable wrong." The Lieutenant Inspector said, "Recite your verse, and I will write it for you. If you attain the teaching, you should liberate me. Don't forget these words." My verse went this way: "Enlightenment originally has no tree, and a clear mirror is not a stand. Originally there's not a single thing. Where can dust be attracted?" After this verse had been written down, the whole community was amazed, and everyone wondered. They said to each other, "How odd! You can't tell about people by their appearance. How could we have employed him, a living bodhisattva, as a servant for so long?" Seeing the surprise and wonder of the crowd, the Grand Master feared someone might do me harm, so he erased the verse with his shoe and said, "This is still not yet perception of essence." Everyone thought it was so, but the next day the Grand Master surreptitiously came to the mill, where he saw me pounding rice, a stone at my waist. He said, "People who seek the way forget their bodies for the sake of the teaching. Will he be like this?" Then he asked me, "Is the rice ready yet?" I replied, "The rice has been ready for a long time, but it still wants sifting." The Grand Master knocked the mortar 3 times with his cane, immediately understanding the Grand Master's meaning. I went to his room at the 3rd watch in the middle of the night. Using his vestment as a screen so no one could see us, he explained the Diamond Sutra to me. When he came to the point where it says, "You should activate the mind without dwelling on anything," at these words I had the overwhelming realization that all things are not apart from inherent nature. I then said to the Grand Master, "Who would have expected that inherent nature is originally intrinsically pure? Who would have expected that inherent nature is originally unborn and undying? Who would have expected that inherent nature is originally complete in itself? Who would have expected that inherent nature is originally immovable? Who would have expected that inherent nature can produce myriad things and phenomena?" Knowing I had realized original nature, the Grand Master said to me, "If one does not discern the original mind, it is of no benefit to study the teaching. If you discern your own original mind and see your own original essential nature, you are what they call a great man, a great person, a teacher of humans and angels, a Buddha." I received the teaching in the middle of the night, unbeknownst to anyone. He then handed on the doctrine of immediacy as well as the bowl and robe, saying, "You are the 6th generation, Grand Master. Be conscientious and spiritually liberate beings everywhere, popularizing the teaching so that it will not die out in the future. Listen to my verse. Those with sense plant seeds. The fruits grow from the ground. Since there is no seed without sense, there is no nature, no life." The Grand Master also said, "When the great teacher Bodhidharma first came to this land a long time ago, people did not yet believe in him, so he handed on this robe as an embodiment of faith, and it has been inherited through generations. As for the teaching, it is transmitted mind to mind, enabling all to awaken themselves and understand themselves. Since olden times, the Buddhas have only communicated the original reality. The teachers have intimately imparted the original mind. The robe is a bone of contention. Let it stop with you and not be passed on. If you were to pass on this robe, your life would be in danger. You must go immediately, for I fear people may harm you." I asked, "Where should I go?" The Grand Master said, "Stop when you meet Hui, hibernate when you encounter Hui." Taking the robe and bowl in the middle of the night, I said, "I am originally a southerner, unfamiliar with the mountain roads here. How can I get out to the mouth of the river?" The 5th Grand Master said, "Don't worry, I'll take you there myself." The Grand Master then took me right to 9 River Station, where he had me get onto a boat. The 5th Grand Master himself took up the oars and rowed. I asked the Grand Master to sit down and let me row, but he said, "It is appropriate that I ferry you across." I said, "When people are at a loss, the guide ferries them over. When one is enlightened, one ferries oneself over." The Grand Master said, "So it is so. Hereafter, Buddhism will become very popular through you. 3 years after you go, I will depart from this world. Now you should go, make your way to the south. It is better not to speak out too quickly. It is hard to promote Buddhism." After I had bade farewell and left the Grand Master, I set out southward. Within 2 months, I reached Mount Ta'ayu. After the 5th Grand Master returned, he did not lecture for several days. The community was perplexed. They asked if he were unwell or indisposed. He replied that it was not that he was ill, but that the teaching had already gone south. When they asked to whom it had been transmitted, he replied, "The capable one got it." The community then knew who it was, because capable is the meaning of the Neng in the name Hui-neng. Several hundred people came after me wanting to take the robe and bowl away. One monk named Hui-ming, formerly a 4-star general and a rough-and-ready type of person, joined in the pursuit with extreme enthusiasm. He chased me down before anyone else. I tossed the robe and bowl onto a rock and said, "This robe represents faith. Is it appropriate to struggle over it?" Then I hid in the bush. Hui-ming went over to the robe and bowl and tried to pick them up, but he could not move them. Then he called to me, "Workman, I've come for the teaching, not for the robe." I then came out and sat on a boulder. Hui-ming bowed and said, "Please explain the teaching to me, workman." I said, "Since you have come for the teaching, you should shut out all objects and not conceive a single thought. Then I will expound the teaching for you." Hui-ming was silent for a long while. I said, "When you do not think of good and you do not think of bad, what is your original face?" At these words, Hui-ming was greatly enlightened. Then he asked, "Is there any further secret idea besides the secret idea just now secretly spoken?" I said, "What I have told you is no secret. If you reflect inwardly, the secret is in you." Hui-ming said, "Although I was at Huangmei, in reality I had not yet seen into my own face. Now that I have received your instruction, I am a man who takes a drink of water and knows for himself whether it is cold or warm. Now you are my teacher, workman." I said, "If you are thus, you and I are both students of Huangmei. Maintain it carefully on your own." Hui-ming also asked, "Where should I go after this?" I said, "If you come to Yuan, then stop. If you come to Meng, then stay." Hui-ming bowed and took leave. When Hui-ming got to the foot of the mountains, he had said to the crowd of pursuers, "I have just climbed to the heights, but after all there was no trace of him. We had better look elsewhere." The pursuers all believed him. Hui-ming later changed his name to Tao-ming to avoid assuming the same first character as the master Hui-neng. Later I came to Cao Chi, but I was again pursued by bad men and took refuge among a group of hunters in the Zuming range. I spent 15 years among them, occasionally expounding the teaching to the hunters when suitable opportunities arose. The hunters used to have me watch over the nets, but whenever I'd see living creatures, I would let them all go. At mealtimes, I would put vegetables in the pot where the meat was being cooked. If anyone asked me about it, I'd reply that I had just ate the vegetables beside the meat. One day I thought that the time had come to disseminate the teaching, and I shouldn't stay in hiding forever, so I finally left and went to the Temple of the Nature of Reality in Quang Province. There, I found the doctrinal master, Yin Cong, lecturing on the Nirvana Sutra. At the time, there was a wind blowing and the pennants were flapping. One monk said, "The wind is moving." Another said, "The pennants are moving." They argued on and on. So I came forward and said, "It is not the wind moving, it is not the pennants moving, it is your minds moving." Everyone was startled. Yin Song invited me up to the front seat and questioned me closely about the inner meaning. He saw that my speech was simple and my reasoning was accurate, and that this did not come from writings. Yin Song said, "Workman, you are certainly not an ordinary man. For a long time I've heard that the robe and teaching of Huangmei came south. Might that not be you, workman?" I said, "I dare not presume." Now Yin Song bowed and asked me to show the community the robe and bowl that had been handed on to me. Yin Song also asked, "How is the legacy of Huangmei demonstrated and transmitted?" I said, "There is no demonstration or transmission. It is only a matter of seeing nature, not a matter of meditation or liberation." Yin Song asked, "Why is it not a matter of meditation and liberation?" I said, because these two things are not Buddhism. Buddhism is a non-dualistic teaching. Yin Tsong asked, "What is the non-dualistic teaching of Buddhism?" I said, "You lecture on the Nirvana Sutra, which explains Buddha nature. This is the non-dualistic teaching of Buddhism. For example, the Bodhisattva King of Noble Qualities says to Buddha, 'Will violation of the 4 serious prohibitions commission the 5 perverse sins? Or being hopelessly incorrigible cut off the roots of goodness and essential nature of Buddhahood?' The Buddha said, 'Roots of goodness are twofold, one permanent, one impermanent. Essential Buddha nature is neither permanent nor impermanent, so it is not cut off. That is called non-duality. Oneness is good. Dualism is not good. The essential Buddha nature is neither good nor not good. This is called non-duality. Ordinary people see the body and the world as two. The wise realize their essential nature is not two. The non-dual nature is the Buddha nature." Hearing this explanation, Yin Tsong was overjoyed. Joining his palms, he said, "My lectures on the scripture are like gravel. Your discourse on meaning is like pure gold." Now he shaved my head for me and wished to regard me as his teacher. So I finally opened up the East Mountain School under the Enlightenment tree. I attained the teaching on East Mountain, enduring supreme hardship and pain, my life hanging by a thread. Now that I have gotten to participate in this assembly along with the governor and his officers, monks, nuns, and lay people, it is all people of eons of affinity, and it is because of having supported Buddhas in past lives, planting roots of goodness together, that you have gotten to hear the foregoing account of attainment of the truth, of the teaching of immediacy. The teaching of immediacy was transmitted by past sages. It is not my own personal wisdom. Those who wish to hear the teaching of the sages of yore should each clear your own mind. After you have heard it, each of you get rid of doubt by yourself, and you will be no different from the sages of former generations." Having heard the teaching, the whole assembly joyfully bowed and withdrew.